All right, now let's talk about recursive debugging. So we're going to start with an example. We'll do range sum here. Copy this example. We'll go here and we'll paste. So range sum wants to add the numbers from low to high. And so the sum from 3 to 5 is 3 plus the sum from 4 to 5. That makes sense. So sure enough, the sum from say 3 to 5 is 12, which is 3 plus 4 plus 5. Excellent. Okay, now the problem here is if there's a bug, it's very hard to tell what's going on because we would know if we crash that we're in range sum, but which range sum? Because range sum calls range sum calls range sum, and it's hard to keep track of which one of those we're in. To show you an example of what I mean, instead of from 3 to 5, let's go from 3 to 8, okay? So that's 33, which is 3 plus 4 plus 5 dot 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 to 8. Fine, okay? So now I'm going to print, just to see what's going on, print low comma high. We'll see. So on the way in, we call range sum of 3 comma 8, 4, 8, 5, 8, 6, 8, 7, 8, 8, 8, and so forth. Okay? So this at least sees the values on the way in. And now I want to also print the result on the way out. The problem there is I actually generate the result in two different places. I generate a result here in a base case and here in a recursive case. We can store that in a variable called result, which doesn't change the logic at all, and return the result. By doing it that way, it's a little cleaner for us now to actually print the result before we return it. And now we're getting calls and returns, and we call 3, 8, 4, 8, 5, 8, 6, and it's interesting here that we have a lot of information, but it's kind of confusing how it's coming at us. Okay, so actually I'm going to kind of shorten this back to 3, 5, so we have less coming out for a little bit. But you got to keep track of what's calling on the way in and what's being returned on the way out, and which call corresponds to which return. So we're going to try to organize this information to understand it better. To begin with, let's print an f string of range sum of low comma high. Okay, and by doing it that way, it's a little cleaner because now on the way in we can see the calls like that. The example in the notes does not use an f string because Python, at the time I'm making this video, the version we're using does not support f strings, but I think f strings are cleaner, so let's use them here. Cool. So that didn't really change anything in the order, just makes it a little easier to read. And then we can print like something like this: returns result, and we'll put that inside an f string as well. And now we can see, like, so when you call and when you return. But I want to add a little more structure here. What I want to do is I want a way to tell that range sum 3 comma 5 calls range sum 4 comma 5. That's not captured here. To do that, I'm going to add another variable called depth, which is the recursion depth. When you call this at the first time, the recursion depth is 0. Okay, when you call it, it's 0. And each time you recursively call, the depth is 1 greater. So it's the depth of the call stack, if you would, at this level. Okay, excellent. And now what I'll do is here, maybe do that. See, we're going to indent by the depth when we print. You have to do it on both sides, on the in and the out. Watch what happens. What happens is it doesn't work because instead of plus, of course, I want it times. Pardon me. And now, so like if we're at a depth of 0, this does not indent. At a depth of 1, we indent by 3 spaces. At a depth of 2, we indent by 6 spaces, and so on. And this is what happens. So we first call range sum 3, 5. Then you can see how that called range sum 4, 5 by the indent. And you can see how range sum 4, 5 called range sum 5, 5. And you can see how range sum 6, 5, now because low is greater than high, 6 is greater than 5, we are in the base case. You can see how this call was not recursive. It just returned 0. What did it return 0 to? Well, the 5, 5 example, which then returned 5, which it returned to this level, which then returned 5 plus 4, and so on. So we can now see how using depth and using indenting, we're able to get a very clear picture of which version of the function we're in, which call of the function we're in, and which one called which one, and when they returned and what they returned. This is great. It has one problem. You're not allowed to do this. You cannot modify the parameters to this function. We have to call it like that, okay? We have to call it just with low and high. But this depth was so helpful. So what we can do is keep it as a default parameter by setting it equal to 0 here. What that means is if we call it, but we don't provide depth, depth will be 0. If we do provide that parameter, it's whatever we provided. This works as expected, and it's allowed because this is optional. We really didn't change how we call range sum. We call it normally, but now we get this depth added as we need it, and that is how we do recursive debugging, adding print statements. And you'll see the version here is quite similar to what we just did.